The X-Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
You, girl, but it's just so hard to do. Every time you do that thing you do, I know all the...
And welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X-Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern on the Talkstar Radio Network, X-Zone Broadcast Network, Star Cable, X-Zone TV, and our worldwide family of broadcast affiliates. If you'd like to give us a call toll-free worldwide, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this first hour of tonight's show is Glen Kreisberg, and we're going to be talking about Glen's book, Lost Knowledge of the Ancients. Glen is the editor and the author of the month page at grahamhancock.com, is a radio frequency engineer, writer, researcher, and licensed outdoor guide, and currently serves as the vice president of the New England Antiquities Research Association. The author of numerous articles and papers, including Lithic Mysteries of the Northeast. He is the founder and editor of the alternative science and history website, ashnews.org. He lives in Woodstock, New York, with his wife and 2 children, and we're going to be talking about Lost Knowledge of the Ancients and Glen Kreisberg. Welcome to the X-Zone.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Tell me, Glen, where did your interest in the lost knowledge of the ancients come from?
Well, it probably goes back to when I had a job as a teenager in an antiquarian bookstore in upstate New York, in the hometown where I lived and grew up, Woodstock, New York. A small town that everybody's heard of. Mm-hmm. So working in this bookstore as a teen, I read a lot of books on ancient history, antiquarian books, books on Celtic mythology and antiquarian topics, Arthurian legend and the likes. And that's where my background in ancient knowledge really began. Coming up through more recent history, I got involved with Graham Hancock and his website 4 or 5 years ago.
Right.
Actually meeting Graham at a conference that he was participating in out on the West Coast. This is the CPAC conference, the Conference on Procession and Ancient Knowledge, which takes place each year on the West Coast. And I was reading Graham's book, Underworld, and had made some observations about some of the temples on Malta, and I had pointed these out to him, and he thought that I was onto something and asked me to write a paper for his forum on his website, and I did, and it was subsequently published in Atlantis Rising magazine a few years later. And this was my article on electromagnetism and the ancients, which is included in this anthology. So he kind of inspired me to
Right.
go a little further in this field.
All right, you and I have to take our first commercial break. You will be back in 2 minutes' time, so don't go anywhere, Glenn. Exonation, Glen Kreisberg is our special guest. Here's the website, www.ashnews.org, and we're talking about this hour in the X Zone, something very interesting and that a lot of people love talking about, lost knowledge of the ancients. Once again, www.ashnews.org, and the name of Glen's book is Lost Knowledge of the Ancients. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. And Glen and I will be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break as we continue right here from our studios in beautiful Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com, and always send your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. Don't go away. Back in 2 minutes.
Gone too far this time, but I'm dancing on the Valentine. I tell you, somebody's fooling around with my chances on the danger line. I'll cross that bridge when I find it. Another day to make my stand. Oh, high time is no time for deciding if I should find a helping hand. Oh, why don't you use it? Try not to bruise it.
We're talking about the ancient knowledge, or the lost knowledge of the ancients. Our special guest this hour is Glen Kreisberg. His website, ashnews.org. He's the author of Lost Knowledge of the Ancients. And Chris, welcome back.
Thanks, Rob.
All right, Chris, how accurate, in your opinion, is the history that we are told about the ancients compared to the actuality concerning the history of the ancients?
Well, I like to use an analogy. If all of history, if all there is to know about history is a dartboard, and every fact we discover about history is a dart we throw at that board and hitting that surface, there are certainly more surface than there is points of facts that we know about history, I think. I think there's still more unknown than there is known about our past, and I think based on I think any historian or archaeologist would probably agree based on the fossil record, because basically what archaeologists do and historians is they take a fragment of history or a fragment of a creature that lived tens of thousands or millions of years ago, and then they put the rest of it together and try to figure out what it looked like, what it behaved like, and they do it with really very little empirical evidence. So there's a lot of speculation and guesswork in ancient history and the knowledge that the ancients had, and we're gaining ground on what we know they knew, but I think most of it is still a mystery.
You know, there's a lot of talk these days about the Mayans and what is going to happen on December the 21st, 2012, with the end of the Mayan calendar. Why do you think that there is such a significance being put on the Mayas at this time? You know, here we are in the year 2010. Are we really going to take everything that people from way back when are going to tell us about?
Well, the Mayans were an interesting culture in that they did put so much emphasis on astronomy and the movements in the heavens, and they certainly were keen observers of those movements and kept very careful records. So we tend to pay more attention to cultures where we know that they did these things, and we want to determine today how closely they were to what we are discovering in our recent times. And it turns out the Mayans were pretty close. Now, It's interesting because I read just recently in the last few weeks that their 2011 or the 2012 date that's being touted may not even be accurate and may be off by as much as 50 years because, of course, since the Mayans created their calendar, our calendar has changed from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar. And that happened, I believe, in the 17th century or around that time. So it's just been very recently called into question whether that 2012 date is an accurate interpretation of the Mayan calendar or if it's off by several decades. So personally, and I have to say I managed to avoid the 2012 topic in this anthology, but I think it represents the end of a cycle, the end of certainly an era and a watershed moment in humanity, in that we're looking at a shift in perspective that's happening, and there are articles in my anthology that speak a little bit more to that shift in consciousness and show how it may in fact be related to astronomical movements and particularly the precession of the equinox.
Who are some of the contributors to your book, Lost Knowledge of the Ancients?
Well, we've got quite a variety. The first article is by Robert Schoch. He's the Boston professor, Boston University professor, who redated the Sphinx on geologic evidence and believes it to be several thousand years older than attributed in the textbooks. So he used modern science, modern geological survey to look at the Sphinx enclosure, and he determined simply and objectively that it was created in a period of great rainfall. And we know that when the Great Pyramids were built, and of course the Sphinx in traditional textbooks is attributed to having been built at the same time as the Great Pyramids about 5,000 years ago, yet that was a very dry period in Egyptian history. You have to go back a few thousand years prior to that before you get the kind of rainfall that was taking place, that the geology of the Sphinx enclosure indicates what the true age is.
When looking back in time, and we everybody's seen photographs of the Sphinx, how does the archaeology behind the Sphinx or its significance add to today's value of life and society?
Well, that's an interesting question. Of course, that you can ask that about all of ancient history, and I think the lessons that we can learn from looking at the cultures of the past, and if you notice, and you're a keen observer of history, you notice that all great civilizations and cultures, from the Egyptians to the Greeks to the Romans, had a rise and a fall, and a lot of times it's related to socioeconomic, climatic conditions, which certainly may have influenced that, but there is a larger cycle that's superimposed on civilization and human consciousness, having to do with the celestial movements and the celestial energies. And there are some articles in my anthology here that speak to that, and I mentioned the precession of the equinox. And Walter Cruttendon, who contributed the article History and Celestial Time, and does precession cause the rise and fall of civilization, he wrote a very fascinating article where he researches the East Indian Vedic culture and the yugas, which are the cycles of time that are attributed to the Dark Age and the Golden Age of humanity. And he believes that there is scientific evidence to prove that our sun is in a binary relationship with another gravitational force, perhaps a star, perhaps a red dwarf or a brown dwarf, something that is unseen to the naked eye at this time, but that this interaction causes a change in electromagnetic energy on the Earth, and it affects our brains, causing our consciousness to change. And this is why many ancient cultures have a tradition of humanity and civilization passing through different ages, and some considered golden ages, some considered silver, some considered bronze, some considered iron. And this is all, according to the ancient East Indian Vedic scripture, predetermined by our position in the heavens. And if you know about the precession of the equinox, you know that this is what's responsible for the ages of the zodiac. It's actually astronomy behind the astrology of the zodiac. So there is some real science and astronomy to the astronomical signs that we consider with our fortunes.
Tell me, is there a common thread through the articles in Lost Knowledge of the Ancients?
I would say the common thread would be the vast cycles of time that are superimposed on human existence, and how they affect us, and how they have played into the major events that in the watershed moments in human history.
Were there any major or big discoveries that were discussed in the book?
Well, one of the most profound articles I find is Richard Hoagland, who wrote a book called Dark Mission: The Secret History of NASA, and Hoagland was he worked for Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and he was Walter Cronkite's science liaison during the Apollo missions, and he has claimed as an insider, having firsthand knowledge, that we have in fact, and NASA has in fact, discovered the remains of ancient civilizations on other planets and have been covering that up.
Well, sure. Bill Hoagland was responsible for the Face on Mars. What
Correct.
can we
he
call
did a lot
this?
of examined and researched a lot of that, and what he did was he foiled NASA for a lot of images that were never released. And he claims, and he's published these in his book, that there's clear evidence in these photographs of structures that are remaining on the surface of the Mars and the Moon as well. Now, a lot of people might think this is kind of crackpot kind of stuff, and Hoagland, there's been attempts to marginalize him, but I've met him and I've talked to him, and he's a credible character. There's no question in my mind.
Well, there's one question I'd like to ask Hoagland, and that is, where did the face on Mars go then? Because according to NASA photos that had been taken by recent missions, there is no face on Mars, and they explain it as basically an optical illusion.
I read all that, and it certainly can be explained that way, and you can take different angle pictures of different monuments and create all kinds of images and perspectives.
Right.
And I'm not saying that these things are there, these things are not there, but I do think it's interesting that on November 3rd at the National Press Club in California, we had a gathering of, I believe there were 6 retired Air Force officers who held a press conference, and they basically announced the same thing, that the government was covering up incidences of UFO encounters. I don't know if you recall this. This was just very recently.
I thought that was in Washington.
No, that was in California at the National Press Club, and that press conference put some nuclear facility commanders, now retired, front and center, who were all claiming independently that they had UFO encounters while in command of these nuclear facilities, reported them to their superiors, and were told not to talk about it. And this is during the 60s and 70s and 80s. And again, these guys are pretty credible witnesses, very respectable military officers who were just, they weren't saying what they believed this were. They were just describing incidences that occurred and relating facts. And they said that when these incidences occurred, their missile bases went down and they would not be able to have fired their missiles.
All right, Glenn, stand by. You and I have to take our news break. We'll be back after the news. Exxon Nation. Glen Kreisberg is our special guest. www.ashnews.org. And we're talking about the lost knowledge of the ancients. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone, a place where people dare to believe, dare to be heard. And Glenn and I will be back on the other side of this break as we continue from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.
Hi, this is Ken Elliott. When I'm floating around the universe, I always try to tune in to Rob McConnell.
Hi ho there, Timothy Frog on Sesame Street. When I want to find out what's going on with UFOs or ghosts, I listen to the X-Zone with Rob McConnell.
This is Les Corrigan from Target Internet Development. You're listening to Rob McConnell on the X-Zone Radio Show. This is John Hogue, prophecy scholar, and you're listening to Rob McConnell in the X Zone.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Seems like yesterday, but it was long ago. Jane, it was lovely, she was the queen of my night. There in the darkness with the radio playing low end, and the secrets that we shared, mountains that we moved, caught like a wildfire out of control, till there was nothing left to burn and nothing left to prove. And I remember what she said to me, how she swore that it never would end. I remember how she held me.
Explanation, our guest this hour is Glen Kreisberg. His website is www.ashnews.org, and we're talking about lost knowledge of the ancients. Before we went to the break, we had just started talking about some of the major discoveries that were talked about in Lost Knowledge of the Ancients, and we were talking about Bill Hoagland and the ancient artifacts that he believes are on Mars as well as on the moon. Now, why do you think this information, if it is real and these monuments and these archaeological objects do actually exist on Mars as well as on the moon, that the information is being suppressed from the public?
Well, Hoagland goes into that in his book and in his article, and he talks about he cites a Brookings Institute report that was commissioned at the founding of NASA. And at NASA's inception, the government had Brookings look at all the different aspects of what space exploration could mean for humanity and the implications it could have for our nation as a program that we're undertaking. And what Brookings Institute came back with on a lot of the questions, and one of the big questions that NASA was asking was, what do we do with the public if we find intelligent life out there in the universe? And the answer from Brookings was, keep it a national secret. Do not share that information. It could destabilize society. So basically the government decided we're not ready for this information and has been keeping it from us. Now, another thing to bring to light, and I was mentioning these Air Force officers who were coming out with encounters that they had during the Atlas missile period in the 60s and 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, basically during the Cold War.
During the Cold War. And they said that when they reported these to their superiors said not to speak about it, but they also said that other incidences had occurred, and not just to the U.S., but also to Russian facilities. And as I mentioned before the break, during these incidences, these facilities went down. They were inoperable. The commanders reported that they could not have fired their nuclear missiles had they wanted to. So this had absolutely national security implications and was quite a serious incident, although it never made it into the public consciousness until just a few weeks ago. Now,
well, wait a second. Hold on here. That's wrong. You're wrong there, because this is not the first time that these gentlemen have gone before the national media. They did this a couple of years ago, and prior to that, a couple of years ago. Like this is nothing new.
This may be, and I appreciate you bringing it to my attention. And what I was about to mention is that in my and it may be what you're relating to, or maybe not. But in my introduction, I talk about the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who in 2008, a few years ago, came out and basically said the same thing. Everybody's
well aware of Edgar Mitchell and his claims and his Noetic Institute and his connection with the higher consciousness. But how come other astronauts who have been on the moon, who have circled the moon, why is there only a very, 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 very small number of these people who are making these claims?
That's an interesting point, and let me ask you something, Rob.
Sure.
Have you ever seen who might be the biggest national hero this country has? He's alive today. He's living, and he probably has a lot to say on this, but this guy never talks. Who am I talking about?
You're talking about Neil Armstrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He alludes to things. Every once in a while he'll make a public appearance and he'll talk and he'll cryptically refer to someday in the future we will know something that we don't know now, but he doesn't say what it is.
But that's very vague, because you and I can make the same statement with different implications because of our.
But we're not Neil Armstrong. We're not the first man to walk on the moon, and why wouldn't he be out there? Debunking this stuff if it's such nonsense.
Well,
if Edgar Mitchell comes out, when NASA issued a statement in reply to Edgar Mitchell, they said he's a true American hero, but we disagree with his opinion. Edgar Mitchell did not state an opinion. He said he had inside, first-hand information from working with NASA that the Roswell incident was something that actually happened and was being covered up. So now we can either dismiss that as being crackpot, or we can say there's something here that's credible, though we can't confirm it.
All right, now hold on here. We're talking. You've kind of lost me. How did we get from the moon to Roswell, New Mexico?
Well, I started talking about Edgar Mitchell, who I mentioned in my introduction, as having also come out and mentioned that we are currently in contact with extraterrestrials, but that the government is covering that up.
All right, now let me ask.
You're right. Something that's not new. It's been said for many years. I feel incrementally we're being prepared for this.
All right, let me ask you this: if this was in fact a fact that there was or that there is lost archaeology or hidden information or suppressed information about what is on Mars as well as on the moon, other countries besides the United States of America have had the ability to, look at Russia. They went to the moon first. If this information is true, don't you think that Russia would love to use this information to show the American people that their government cannot be trusted?
No, they'd have to say the same thing about themselves. If they had this information and
how do we know this? How do we know this for a fact that they have this information? Like, we're just getting this.
We don't. We're speculating here, Rob. You know that as well as I do. But the facts are coming out slowly. You can't deny when an astronaut who walked on the moon is telling you something like that. You can't just dismiss it.
Why not?
Well, apparently you can, because none of this stuff ever gets any traction in the real media. So when you get an astronaut like Edgar Mitchell, or you get nuclear commanders from facilities coming out and saying these things, point blank, and it's not picked up by Anderson Cooper, who you'd think would have these guys, these majors and these colonels. He'd think he'd have them on question.
No. You know what? I agree with the mainstream media for not flaunting this, because these people come with no evidence. There is no evidence whatsoever to substantiate any of their claims. They talk a lot, but when it comes to the evidence, there is none.
So you don't believe that Hoagland has any evidence? He's just blowing smoke.
Yeah, that's my opinion exactly.
Okay, well, and you're absolutely entitled to it.
Because I would love to. You see, I want to believe. But doing this show now for 20 years, talking to over 3,200 guests, no one has come to me with any physical evidence. A lot of theories, a lot of hypotheses, a lot of what ifs, and a lot of, I've heard this from so-and-so, inside information, but no proof.
Then let's switch gears. Let's talk about another article in the anthology here by a guy named Bedridian, who's with the State of India's Archaeological Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing archaeology off the northwest coast of India in the Gulf of Cambay. He's doing it 40 kilometers out in the Gulf and 60 meters deep in the ocean, and he's pulling up artifacts that show that human beings were creating pottery and creating villages and cities thousands of years before Sumer in Mesopotamia. So here you have evidence that's showing that the cradle of civilization lies off the coast of India, and that cities were being built and pottery was being created, and most likely agriculture was taking place on a fertile plain thousands of years prior to what is attributed in any textbook. And this is backed up by evidence. The pictures are there. The photos are there. It's all done by archaeologists and deep water excavation, and the proof is there.
You see,
when it makes it into the university textbook, then it'll be accepted. But right now, it's not acknowledged.
But you see, you said a magic word there, artifacts. That's physical evidence. That I can, that I can believe.
Well, maybe when we mount expeditions to the moon and
But
Mars,
we've been there already.
With the specific goal of doing archaeological excavation to determine whether there were prior civilizations. That's never been the goal of any of our missions, and if it was, we certainly weren't told it was.
But
if evidence was found, according to Brookings Institute, it should not be shared.
All right,
so
but
why would you expect there to be evidence?
Well, let's take a look at society today. Do we really need to spend more money, waste money, going to the moon, sending these billions and billions of dollars in space projects, going to Mars, when we can't even take care of the people on this planet? I, for one, would love to see NASA scrapped. I really would, because they're wasting valuable money that could be used for the homeless, for the sick, for the hungry. I really believe that science is wonderful, but science has its priorities wrong. Take care of the people now. We need their help now. We need the help of the scientific community to help feed this planet, to help, heal this planet, not only the planet.
That's why studying the past is so fundamental. We as humans are notorious for not learning from our mistakes and not learning from the lessons of history. Yep. We ignore them.
Oh, I agree with you 100%.
That's something we agree on.
Yeah.
It's an interesting phenomenon. I mean, I understand what you're saying with the science, the priorities of science, and who sets those priorities, and are they truly looking out for the best interest of society as a whole? These are legitimate points to debate. But whether we can learn something valuable from studying history and learning from the lessons and mistakes of our past, there's nothing to debate there. We can and we should. Do we? No.
Of course not. And let's take a look. Let's just take a look at history, because archaeology is a major part of history. We know for a fact that Christopher Columbus did not discover the Americas, and yet every textbook in schools today has Christopher Columbus as the person who discovered the Americas.
Well, thank you, Ron.
That's just one example.
As Vice President of New England Antiquities Research Association, which is a group that has a lot of diffusionists in it and believe that there were transoceanic voyages thousands of years ago, not just 500 years before Columbus, which the evidence supports, but there's evidence out there, the Kensington Runestone and other artifacts that exist. And again, there's a case to be made here that a lot of this has been suppressed as well. That there were transoceanic voyages in early human history, and that culture did diffuse across the globe and didn't necessarily develop independently in different areas.
Yeah.
And isolationism, diffusionism, there's a legitimate debate there as well to be had. But I believe the diffusionists are winning out. I think the evidence is showing that folks did travel from Western Europe across the ice sheet into the northeast of America, bringing with them their technology. And that's why we do see megalithic sites in New England that resemble what's in northwest Europe and Great Britain. And it's enigmatic and it's not explained. It falls through the cracks of archaeology and anthropology. But the evidence is there, and it's slowly being put together, and the theories are shifting. And this is a lot of what my book talks about, these shifting paradigms in history and science, and how what we once believed to be true and ground or the foundation of a lot of our historical knowledge is the underpinning is being pulled out from under us. And it's important to take note of these things, because we are going to have a different perspective in 20 years, in 100 years, in 500 years. And many of the folks, I believe, that are written in this book are going to be seen as having called it right back in our time.
When we look back in time, we were talking a few minutes ago about Christopher Columbus, and excuse me, what about the Vikings? What about the Irish? The Irish monks, they were over in North America 500 years before Columbus. Why?
1,000 years before, yeah, absolutely.
Right. So why don't we teach this to the kids in school? Why do we have to make Christopher Columbus the hero that he's not?
Well, it's frustrating to me as well, and these are the things that need to change, and I think slowly they will. Well, I've got a kindergartner and a fourth grader, and when they come home, Columbus Day, and they've got all this stuff on Columbus, I try to set them straight, and I say, well, he did take part in the voyage of discovery, but others and well before him, and discovered the things that he discovered before him, and landed on our continent, not an island in the Caribbean, but on our continent proper, 500 and perhaps 1,000 years, and I personally believe a few thousand years prior to Columbus. So it is frustrating, and there's a lot of there's a political aspect to it that keeps Columbus Day and the image of Columbus as pristine as it is. But I think people who study the subject know a little bit more about what the truth is.
You and I have to take our final break, Glenn. Please stand by. It's a great pleasure talking to you. Exonation Glen Kreisberg is our special guest. We're talking about lost knowledge of the ancients. His website, www.ashnews.org. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as we continue from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, Exonation. The X Chronicles newspaper for November is coming out on the 25th of this month. If you'd like to get a copy of the paper, go to www.xchronicles-newspaper.com/request.htm. Fill out the form that's there, and we'll make sure that you start getting your very own copy of the X Chronicles newspaper with our compliments and the compliments of our many advertisers. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away. We'll be back after the short break.
I should have known you bid me farewell. There's a lesson to be learned from this, and I learned it very well. Now I know you're not the only starfish in the sea. If I never hear your name again, it's all the same to me. And I think it's gonna be alright. Yeah, the worst is over now. The morning sun is shining like a red rubber ball.
Exonation, our special guest this hour, Glen Kreisberg. We're talking about lost knowledge of the ancients, www.ashnews.org. First of all, Glen, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great hour. With so many, how can I call them? I'm just going to call it the way it is. With so many lies about history as it is, how do we know that in the future these lies won't continue and the true history and the true stories won't be told?
Well, they always say history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that as time goes on, the playing field is going to be leveled somewhat. Due to new media, the internet, communication tools that are coming out. I think the somewhat Eurocentric view of history is fading into the past, and those glasses and filters are coming off, and we're hearing from a lot of other corners of the world and their perspectives. And I do think that's going to have a change on what we hear and what we find out. I still think the truth is going to be skewed somewhat. It always is. It always takes time for it to shake out, but I do think the perspective of history 100 or 200 years is better than it is 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years. Time tends to shake things out, and people seem to look at things a little more objectively as time passes. Now, that said, there's still a lot of and I'm not sure if I'd call it lies. I mean, I'm sure there are some intentional lies and some conspiracy type things that are suppressing certain knowledge, and we've talked about that. But I think by and large, knowledge and access to it and information is opening up. And I also think that if we believe these cycles of time that I spoke about, the ages of man, we are in leaving a dark age and ascending, and are in a time of expanding consciousness and knowledge, and we will only continue to gain, I believe, more of a grasp of the truth.
I agree with you, and it's nice to know that there's people like you out there, Glenn, making sure that when the truth becomes available, you get it out to the public. So thanks very much for the great work you do.
Well, I appreciate you appreciating it.
Glenn, quickly let our listeners know how they can get a copy of Lost Knowledge of the Ancients.
Well, you can Google it. You can go to Amazon. It's for sale at most bookstores, the traditional big ones, some of the smaller independents, which I'd like to support.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be actually giving a signing and a reading at Market Block Books in Troy, New York. It's right next to the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. That'll be this Friday at 7 p.m. And so you can go to my website, which you mentioned, ashnews.org. It's prominently displayed front and center there. You can get information on the book and the editor and the contributors and all that good stuff.
All right, Glenn, thanks very much for joining us. Continued success, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet here in the X Zone.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
You take care of yourself, and I'd also like to thank the good people at Inner Traditions for helping make this interview possible. I'll be back on the other side of the news at 6.5 minutes past as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away.